Sup everybody, this is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my continuing mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And today we're taking a look at Operencia, a first-person dungeon-delving, creature-killing, cavern-crawling, party-tromping title that aims square for the established territory that Grimrock and Bard's Tale 4 have dug into deep, and trying to offer a little something new, a little something old, and offers a little something peculiar, but we'll get to that in a moment. Operencia is out today on Windows and Epic Store and Game Pass and Xbox as well. Let's see how it did, shall we? As always, if you liked the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Operencia. Laugh out loud party banter, getting your fills of insta-death kills, and moments when you look at a puzzle and wonder if the devs are fourth-dimensional beings. And graphics are up first. Operencia is a hard game to define. One part parallax art form slowly sliding across the screen like older storytelling paper cutout books. The next a fantasy-inspired trudge through various world designs, all leaning more towards the color and texture of World and Warcraft. Then say Grimrock's more dire and dark and gritty front-facing enemies, all of them ready to smash you and see if ham is just another name for humans who've been smashed into jam. The game has a delightful air about it though, and not the least of which is helped by a saturated color palette that brings the tone into this sort of unique space for this genre. The first time you notice this may be the toad-like enemies with their strange bulbous eyes facing off against you, swinging balls and chains the size of a damn tractor tire, to facing off against the game's later foes that at times can have a darker element to them, even if they aren't particularly inspired. Strangely enough, the human enemies in the game walking around look very poor. One level has a majority of humans whose appearance prior to fighting them looks almost a generation old. But then when you leap into battle, they look pretty good. It is an odd take for sure. Also, while I love Operencia's battle system working with no hesitation, you just click and attack with instant feedback on screen, most of the attacks on your side aren't always the best looking. Sometimes spells have this low rent to them, like you hired the local hedge wizard and then glued Gandalf's beard to his face, slapped on some robes, and hoped no one would notice. And this is something you definitely see when you use some of the skills, and the first time you cast it, you're sort of like, what? Though I have to say, their design isn't necessarily bad when it comes to the spells, from arcing electrical shields projecting out to fire exploding around the enemies. It's just that it doesn't have the cultivated or impressive stylings and polish of other games in the genre. Now, when it comes to the levels, though, themselves, I have to say, I really like Operencia. Even the starting location after the tutorial, which is this crazy underwater dungeon with good lighting and effects throughout, to the later locations where metal trees arc up into the sky, or an entire castle you walk through that's embraced in this almost maniacal attempt at seeing if it can drive you crazy with its architecture alone. Of course, we have to talk about performance here for a second, and the PC version runs fine with a 1070 at 1440p, 60 FPS and above, with absolutely no problems with all the settings on high. I did notice some technical bumps here and there where that frame rate did drop in particular viewpoints, or moments where it dropped where it really shouldn't have, but it's not something that you probably can't work around. Also, the game doesn't really have a bevy of graphical options, but it has enough to sort of work around any of the variables you may end up coming up against if you want a higher FPS. I sadly got no time with the console version. Taking that all together, I love some of what Operencia is doing. The cutscenes are amazingly refreshing from a dramatic standpoint and fit very well with the 3D world. However, the 2D splash screens, for instance, and the characters you see pop up, they also look good as their own design standpoint, but they do not feel like they perfectly gel into one complete whole. But when you look at it and you look at its cost, I would say Operencia fits about exactly where I expected, with some excellent positives, some really good look to the game world at different times, but then a few things that let it down. Sound, music, and voice.
Or we can attack him now, catch him off guard.
Let's leave that up to the Daydreamer here.
A couple of years into their pissing match, just about 2 decades ago, Fuckard told Breck he had managed to curse this place, and all it would take were the tears of a young maiden to submerge the castle into the lake.
I let my pride take over, and the assumption it would be someone else.
and today we're going to do sound first. Well, ranging from good to excellent, from battle sounds to spells blasting out fiery heat onto your foes like the world's worst safety-checked electric blanket being thrown on them, the game does well with what it has and does some processing and some nice volume to open up locations and then tightens that down with environmental creaks and groans, best demonstrated by your first foray into the subterranean and also sometimes underwater castle, where it sounds like half the roof is going to collapse in on your head at any one time, and the more directional-based sounds of enemies patrolling the next room can be heard. This is all pretty well done. However, when you step into combat, things can get a little bit odd. Many spells are fine, from electricity arcing off the ballsacks of a bunch of cultists who thought stepping up to the only two people walking by themselves in a dangerous land sounded like a good idea. You can also have some completely wonky effects. For example, sword swings never really hit right, with a strange, high-tinged, almost raspy sound to them. And these oddities are only continued whenever you end up facing any animal creatures, like the spiders, for instance, whose strange screech and heavy on the high-end web attacks sound like someone tried to attack you with a sample of the Bee Gees singing at the lowest possible bitrate. It can be a bit screechy in parts, and it does not help the experience there. The sound has some high points for sure, but it's brought down by some questionable decisions, especially when it comes to the full range of effects and sounds during attacks. And that brings us to music. I gotta say this, never expect to be surprised in Operencia, both by the excellent overall feeling of the music, but also the somewhat sameness that the game exudes compared to other titles. The excellent string sections playing out in dungeons is without a doubt really well done, with a tone and sometimes elegant use of matching melody to the environment. But the soundtrack never plays to its strengths. It plays way too safe, almost having an ambient effect throughout, and never digs its heels in. Even the battle music never really catches you and just sort of swings up to a faster tempo. I just can't help from feeling that there was an attempt to make sure nothing stood out, which in effect actually lowers the overall impact. As a package, it is not bad at all, but it's not really something that's going to grab you or keep your attention, and in the end sort of just ends up playing in the background and is somewhat forgotten. And of course, that brings us to voice, and this is very good, but there are a couple issues here. First, the good. Some of the NPCs you meet are very well done, and even though many of the antagonists at times can sound a bit like a filter was done to their voice, and that's pretty much good enough, the interplay banter in the game is absolutely on point. It's a highlight easily, and it has to be Joska who's the best, who has a series of quips and one-liners that not only were actually insanely well written, but actually funny as well. As you progress through the game, you're going to find that some of the wittiest writing comes between the characters and the steady battle banter. Like when you face off against a nasty spider and the rogue's best advice to the approach is for the warrior to wedge his head in the spider's fangs so the other two people can flank it. And its delivery was legitimately funny. However, some of the characters you can put in your party and a few others absolutely do not meet that same high bar. Examples abound of inflection connected to reading off a script, and they can be almost painful to listen to. Where Sebastian and let's say Joska sound interesting and notable in their attitudes and demeanor, your main character never really hits it off at all, nor do the other characters you can choose, and it comes off robotic or with emotion that just does not match the words. Nevertheless, for a mostly non-native English-speaking development team, I have to say the writing is well done with mostly crisp movements from point to point to point in the story, and overall the presentation and audio moments by and large are good, but with a couple serious weaknesses when it comes to one or two of the characters. But good or bad, none of those will matter if the gameplay doesn't back it up, and so we're at gameplay and a bit about the story now. You play as, well, you, a young adventurer who quite literally followed your dreams and ended up in an underwater dungeon filled to its raspy brim with all manner of monsters. You find out that quickly the Sun King has gone missing, taking the sun with him, and it's your job to work through the game's 13 levels to find out what happened and try to reverse the situation before the world dies. And I think we can all see where this is headed, because what would a good monster-smashing game be if everyone in the damn game world wasn't a bad guy dead set on killing you as quickly as they can? One thing you never have to worry about in this game is deciding if that dude up there is an enemy in front of you. If they're moving, run towards them and kill them. Since Operencia is a turn-based first-person dungeon crawler, it means you are driving around in your fantasy version of the Scooby-Doo mystery van, filled to the brim with adventures, all of which you can choose 4 from, and each is upgradable with skill trees. And Operencia never really goes out of its way to break from any of those facets. You're going to be facing off against the monsters roaming the levels and trying to kill them. You're going to find secrets. You're going to use mystical items. All the while, you're also solving puzzles that go from put this key in this lock right in front of you to straight up Dan Brown level crypto moments where you're going to be staring at a picture of an item and flat out think, this is impossible. Now, traveling around the locations is actually very enjoyable, and while it uses a 3D grid-based movement system as well as a 3-level battle system, close, middle, and far, The game allows for you to look around using your mouse as you do so, and strangely enough, this isn't just a utilitarian effect left over from the developer thinking we don't want them to feel like their spine is fused all the way down. It's actually quite usable, as sometimes hidden items or secrets can only be seen by really looking around your environment versus moving around it, and I love that. I found a number of secrets and I figured out a number of puzzles by looking at them from different angles or direction. While not world-shattering, it does break up the monotony of most of these games, making you feel like the king on a friggin' chessboard, north, east, south, and west when it comes to movement. Like most games of its kind though, Operencia is rife with monsters, one you can ambush if you sneak up behind, and others that can ambush you in turn, or at times when you see each other from far off, you can just rush into each other's arms at full speed. Ambushing gives you initiative, or the enemy, for one round. The game's combat starts with initiative and sets up an order of attackers on the left, indicating not only any special rules for that, but also anything like armors or spells or slowed down movements due to spiderwebs slowing you down or otherwise. When it's your turn for a character, you have a series of choices of moves, close and far, both dictated by the weapons you have for those ranges, as well as a series of skills which you can buy when you level up. Now, skills range from the mundane, like healing, poison, and so forth, to full-on somersault and stab fests, where your character leaps into battle to give the enemy unique penalties, as well as dealing a good bit of damage, but also possibly taking some themselves. And I like this teeter-totter effect of back and forth that works in the game. While many skills are risk-free, it's the major ones that later on can come back to bite you in the ass if you're unlucky, and the justification for their use can come at the risk of a game over screen depending on the difficulty you chose. When attacking or being attacked, you see a series of animations, as well as any status effects pop up, and of course some characters can taunt you, causing you to attack them first, some can stun someone, some can poison, others can leave you wondering, can I even beat these guys? And I'm looking at you, you fiery spawn bastard. Also, the skills have ranges where they do or have a higher chance of doing more damage, but they also have elemental connections, wind, fire, and so on. A bit later in the game, you unlock party skills, which are built by using skills of the required element, offering a duality to your choices when you upgrade a character, as most have skills you can buy that do the different elemental types. So for example, you could buy wind skills for one character, fire for another, and so on, but you would build your party skill slower. You outfit a number of party members with one element skills, and you build it incredibly quickly. The only problem is you may face an enemy that just doesn't give a shit about whatever your special is. Like the skeleton, sure you can poison their water bowl, but no amount of bowel-shattering trips to the porta potty is really going to affect somebody who doesn't have intestines, where ice may freeze them and make it easier to hit. What isn't here is the ability to move characters. It's not like some other titles with your heroes placed 3 across and 2 deep, but instead only the enemies really are, giving you a feeling of your comrades shoulder to shoulder in this world's version of a stabby conga line, but not really having a lot of strategy. Whether you like the lack of character movement and checking and push abilities will be up to you. I noticed it wasn't there, but I can't help but say I didn't actually miss it in this title either. And of course, you do get that trade-off here where the enemies don't really have anything like spell points like you do, but they do less damage, and your output of damage goes up depending on the weapons you upgrade and your stats. Speaking of upgrading, you can do a little bit of both. Now first, weapons can be traded out, all affecting stats in some way, from damage done to enchanted items that add to your vigor, which is basically your health in this game, or strength, which is how hard you hit. You have spots for helmet, jewelry, armbands, chest, 2 hands, a ranged weapon, as well as boots. And keep an eye on all of these things, because while the game does have an optimize all button outfitting whatever selected character with the overall best stuff, that might not be the way you want to play the game, because the game doesn't actually know that. So if you like to keep a hard-hitting character alive to really do some van damage at the end stages of some battles, the game may try to outfit you with a ton of high defense armor that doesn't give you bonuses to attack, which you may want. It works in the short run, but sooner rather than later, you're going to want to manually take command of what you upgrade with. As you're upgrading items, you're also getting experience for every enemy killed, and at some point you go up a level, with each level having 3 passive perks as well as an active skill you can buy until you unlock the next skill higher. So one skill level may give you a high damage arrow special skill, but also it might have 3 spots that raise your accuracy statistic by a good amount. And you guys know me, I absolutely hate a +5 damage. I think it's the most boring thing in the world, and I would have liked more active skills being there. When it comes to skills, there are 3 categories for each character, usually involving later skills being team damage, team healing, or some other high-level attack. You can also get a number of passive specials as well, like bonuses to particular elemental attacks, or bonuses to poison, or bonuses that trigger when using them, building defenses or healing characters and so forth. Then you get to the attributes, and I have to say, this is when things, again, continue to be a little bit odd. It's not that raising strength and having that adjust your damage level is odd, it's just that a number of them overlap with the skills as well, as I said before. Now, that does offer some flexibility. That means when you level up, you could possibly have a skill point that might adjust one of those attributes or use one of the 3 attribute points to do it, but again, that overlap feels a little bit overused. It's just a bit odd, and to me shows that perhaps there were some budgetary reasons for this when it comes to extending the skills to maybe viable movements and animations versus some attribute adjustments, which is what we get here. What's this going to matter if it's too hard or too easy? And I do like the difficulty settings here you can choose, and you can choose a couple of them as well, including turning off a number of saves as well as permadeath and turning off auto mapping. The game can go from fairly easy to nut-crunchingly hard depending on your choices and the battles you have. If you're new to this, I would say easy is probably best for you, but if you understand how to work a typical attribute and equipment-based battle system, you're going to find that Operencia can get quite easy quickly. This is until you get to the puzzles, because this ain't Goldilocks. It's either hard or easy. With you lurching up to a door and easily figuring out what you need to do by reading a robust journal or just staring at it for a couple seconds, to others where you end up scratching your head for an hour or two, and more than one made me think, this is completely, utterly not possible. Lastly, a lot of the game hinges on the same overall mythology and storytelling effect of campfire tales of mythical heroes, meaning campfires are where you save, as well as use the somewhat simple crafting system where you have to guess the recipe originally by reading a hint system for the ingredients. I sort of like that. I wish it was more robust, as well as a camp merchant allowing you to buy weapons and armor. I really did like those campfire moments in that gameplay. It reminds me of the original Bard's Tale style titles, where the campfire was a majority of where some of the special systems were utilized. Here, and while you're traveling, it also is where a lot of the story is told, like friends around a fire, and I really did enjoy that pace. Sadly, all that taken into account, I could never shake Operencia's feeling of imbalance. Some levels look incredibly good, and others are a bit drab and boring. Some enemies are excellent looking and enjoyable to fight. Others seem to be nothing more than been there, done that kind of elements. And some of the puzzles were incredibly hard, and many were easy to the point of just looking at it and going, this is for sure what I need to do. Lastly, when it comes to the length of the game, this is really going to depend on the difficulty settings and the puzzles and how long you get stuck on some of them. Because some of them, I have a feeling some people are just going to figure out, and others, like I said, it's a little bit uneven, are going to find things incredibly easy. 12 to 15 hours total time, depending on if you get stuck, and certainly depending on if you turn off insta-death or the map making or other elements like that. And of course, all of this brings us to fun factor. There's a lot to like in Operencia for sure, from the puzzles to the quick combat to the way most everything is detailed to you for quick and well-informed decision making. And I loved the way the story was paced out around the fire pits. Now, despite not being as deep as Bard's Tale 4 or as robust in its world set as Grimrock, Operencia is enjoyable, especially when you get that proper flow and start looking for secrets and you find one, or the first time you use a magic shovel and you think, okay, this is sort of cool, as it gives you instructions on where the next buried treasure may be. And a couple hours into Operencia, that's when I realized there was a lot of strengths here that end up overshadowing some of the budgetary issues. And what you get is a actually very fun game. It's got enjoyable combat mechanics, if at times a little bit basic. And what you end up having is something that, despite some uneven moments, it really is enjoyable from start to finish. So as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, never touch rating system, with rent being replaced by deep sale on PC. At $29.99, I think this is a fair price for getting into this. It is beautiful at times, and it is certainly very, very fun. It does have some unevenness here or there. Also, though, you got to remember, this is on PC and Xbox Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, you can just download it because you already have Game Pass and not pay anything, and you can play it that way as well. And I certainly would suggest, even if you didn't really like a lot of what I've described in this review, that might be a way to check it out. So anyway, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked the video, give it a thumbs down. Check out Reddit or Twitch or Twitter. They're all in my description. You can feel free to join me there. Of course, you can become a patron on the Patreon website, which allows me to give you guys reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And I buy a copy of every single game I do a review for, even if the developer gives me a code. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.